Yes. All right. Good afternoon, everyone. Only one. Yes. All right. So, I want to make a confession. We had a couple of folks from vehicle manufacturing companies as well. Unfortunately, one of them fell sick and one of them had to decline. But nonetheless, I still have two of my friends and panelists. So we'll probably be diving deeper more in hardware and then from their perspective on automotive as well. Well, let me take out the questions. All right. So first question to my friend here, Dennis the Menace. You should check out the hard pawn lab and see. When you see him working, you will know. Yeah. All right. So, what are the most common hardware-based security vulnerabilities that you encounter typically in automotive systems or vehicles, and what are the ways in which you can mitigate it?
So many people are wondering why the heck I'm sitting here. But the interesting thing generally, just maybe as an introduction, is that nowadays the cars are less cars, but they are more software companies. So the more I kind of work with, I was looking at Teslas and some other EV companies, and it's basically imagine like a normal IoT system. And so a lot of things which you find which are broken IoT systems, you find also broken in cars. One of the things is there's like a lot of logic errors, where you can mess with particular things. The other thing is that devices get more and more complicated. So especially the infotainment system of a car, that's the number one way how people get into devices. So infotainment systems run some Android, which is not updated for quite a while, which has access to the CAN bus from where you can, take over the whole car. So there's like a lot of complexity in these devices. You have, just a lot of devices and firmwares and other things in there which no one really knows how they work, and just breaks over time the security of the car. And one of the ways, how you could try to circumvent that or figure out what's going on is keeping this SBOM, what the new kind of hip word is, or keeping track of what kind of hardware you're using, what kind of vendors you have. But yeah, if you have a car and the infotainment system, you have a problem one way or the other at some point. I know if it answers the question.
Yes, it does. All right. Over to you, Sachin. So since you have a background in both automotive and medical, so I just want to understand, how do you balance between safety and security? And when you talk about safety, in both the parlance, medical and automotive, are they in silos, or how does the manufacturer actually approach safety and security?
All right, great. First of all, good afternoon, everyone. Thanks to Aseem and Nullcon for inviting me for this insightful discussion. So this is a very interesting point, whether irrespective whatever the domain is, it's a safety and security. I don't think they go in silo. They go hands in hands together. When it comes to, if you consider the automobile, right? So there are a lot of functionalities which are very, very time critical. So given, say, for example, let's say, I think what we have been discussing, airbags, right? So, at the time of deploying the airbags and you start performing the crypto, operation, and then just within a few milliseconds or microseconds, the things will go other way around, basically. So obviously you can't ignore the security at that moment, but at the same time, I would say that they are very, very tightly coupled. So there are to reach to that particular safety point, it's always start way ahead. It doesn't happen just at that particular moment. So there are a lot of ways to get into that, whether it's a hardware or a software. But yeah, I think there is no thin, there's no specific boundary that, hey, this is safety or this is, only security. They definitely go hands in hand. So especially like when you design the product, it starts right from writing the system requirements. When you design the systems, writing the system requirements, and then, how you follow the complete deployment of, especially considering the hardware, getting my more insight back to the hardware only. So, automobile is consist of a lot of sensors, and there are different security modules, hardware security modules are there, and then so we need to be very, very particular, like which operation or which instance needs to be handled, with security, or how things should go there. So it's again airbag is just one of the functionality, brakes, and the other critical systems are there in that. So yeah.
So do you think that safety has been there for a very long time? When the whole automotive industry when we started seeing cars, right? Do you see this similar kind of maturity, or is it as mature as the safety in terms of standards or testing? Security versus safety.
Okay.
So, generally cars have like a different, safety and security kind of observation than, other devices. One thing with cars, what you want to look at is like how, if something fails, it should fail in a safe way and not like, in a weird way. I must also admit, by the way, so I have a car which is like a 70s Ford pickup truck, which has no IoT, no cabling, no CAN bus. So you can't hack me. But at some point, this whole kind of aspect, you have like a lot of certifications and other things which you have in cars, and they don't really are up to the time of what we are introducing into cars. Like a lot of sensors, which the easiest example, the airbag is triggered by a sensor which is in front of your car. Now the question is if that sensor fails, how does it fail in the sense of does it deploy your airbag if it's just brakes? Does the brake not work if something else happens? So there's a lot of kind of things which we need to kind of define. One side is the safety aspect, which a lot of safety aspects in cars are written by blood, literally. So a lot of things which we have nowadays with the seat belts is because people died in the past. Nowadays we want to kind of avoid that in the sense of by instead of killing people to notice what is safe, we should kind of design that in advance. Problem is, as soon as security comes in, we need to kind of rethink the whole problem again, because our security might have an impact on safety. By kind of enforcing security on something, you might reduce the safety. I had one example. We jump around on airbags a lot, because airbags, surprisingly, have firmware and other things. Imagine your car detects a threat because, the sensor triggers, you're crashing into a wall, and the firewall or the IDS, IPS decides oh no, this is fake, I'm not deploying the airbag. But it's kind of bad for you, while you kind of, getting smushed in the car. So there's a lot of kind of things which we need to observe. Or imagine, your, media player in your car decides oh, I need to kind of spam the CAN bus because I want to play some music, instead of tripping the airbag. So we really need to rethink the whole problem. And the more things we put into a car, the more, more convenient things we put into a car. The old safety guarantees which we have, from, back then might not be, working anymore in our current kind of setups anymore. So, in regard to regulatory things, regulatory, I don't know if anyone was ever, part of, designing, some regulatory kind of paper or something. There's a work group. It will take years. There's a lot of vendors which are kind of having, their opposition because, some kind of small change and, one requirement will cost them millions of dollars because we kind of need to add something. The general problem which you have is, we develop attacks against, embedded devices, which can be in in cars, which can be in other, industrial systems, like literally every couple months, basically, right? So you have every, couple months, you have like a new attack, which people didn't thought that it's possible. People develop tooling, which is better, like, all the fault injection things. We're able to extract firmware from chips, which we, we're not able in the past. And so every time you have like a new thing, it will take forever, like for, the government basically to update their regulatory policies basically. And it's actually getting worse because you have like multiple stakeholders there. You have like the car companies, you have obviously the government organizations, you have like some other industry leaders, because many things in the cars are not even manufactured by the car manufacturers, they're coming from different suppliers. So a lot of people have like their own interests in this whole thing. And I mean, obviously car companies try to save money, and the government, well, I'm not sure what the government wants, and suppliers want to kind of sell more products. So there's like this weird kind of thing, and this takes basically forever, like for one standard, like to come out and to be updated, basically. So we are basically, losing the race every time something new comes out, in my opinion.
Yeah. Exactly. No, I think very well said. I think by the time you identify the new attacks or the exploits, obviously the standards and all the regulatory requirements are still trying to catch up the things. But one good point, Aseem, here is like, if you follow the things religiously, then there are very less chances you get into the trap of the attacks. So they do get like, I know, it gets updated a little bit slow, and but yeah. It's both the way it's true actually. So if you follow the things which has been provided through these standards correctly, then you may not find such a large number of vulnerabilities then.
All right. I will slightly disagree here because we have all the standards in the world, right? But we still keep getting hacked. Yeah. So maybe you mentioned one word. I forgot before, something to do with adhering to, let's call it adhering. If you mean it, did you mean it from the reference of only standards or religiously looking at the security of the vehicle or the product?
Yeah, obviously looking from the security point of view primarily. Say for example, if your standard says like, hey, follow, let's say, layman's language, like, okay, go for, AES 128 or something like that. So, obviously there's nothing wrong with AES 128. But the kind of vulnerabilities which exist is primarily associated with the deployment of it. Like, it's inside the hardware where it is being deployed actually. So the algorithm still holds good. So, that's my point, right? Standard will guide you, but actually it's up to you, like, then how you are deploying the things actually in the real world.
Yeah. I totally agree with that, because most of the crypto as in cryptography, not cryptocurrency. Crypto vulnerabilities related to symmetric encryption are always implementation problems with the keys.
Exactly.
Where you store them. All right. So what policies, if you want to speak from your organization perspective or just general overview, but what policies do you have in place, or do you see that they should be in place, to ensure that these third-party vendors are adhering to hardware security? So I'm not talking SBOM, because that just doesn't make any sense here.
It's a difficult question in a sense. For me as a German, the thing is like in Europe, or in Germany in particular, we have like literally everything codified. You cannot have a sticker on your car windshield without it being certified. And if it's not certified, they basically will fine you every time they kind of get you. In our countries, in the US, it's like, if your car's rusted through, no one cares. So there's a lot of the problem generally is like we have like, as mentioned before, like a lot of stakeholders and a lot of different policies by different, regulatory bodies, like in US, there's like a completely different like view on all the topics than like in Europe. There's a potentially different view here in India, or like one thing which I saw quite often is like the mentality, especially in Japan, and where a lot of car manufacturers come from, is a completely different one, which we have here. And so to combine all of these things together, I see it as a nearly impossible kind of task, so that we will have a common policy on how we do cybersecurity. Because throwing cryptography on problems is not solving them. It's just okay, we have a checkbox, but we did something. So I'm not even sure how we can solve that, on a global perspective, or even on a national perspective. To be fair, I break stuff, so the less secure stuff is, the better for me. To be fair, so I have a different perspective here a little bit. Yeah, I'm not seeing it coming. To be fair, that there's some policy which will kind of solve all our issues. Sorry about that.
Fair enough. No, that's okay. The way I look at it, it's Aseem, to your point, the policies. Obviously, what he mentioned is also correct. But at the organizational level, I believe each vendor, or it depends. Say for example, a lot of big companies, they have, let's say, having the security as a design requirement. By default. And, irrespective whether it's a hardware or software, whatever the components you want to integrate it, let's say it has to go through for a certain level of pen testing. Before that, you can't, even accept it or, take it in. So at least org level policies should be defined very well, very structurally. That is something which is in hand, So at the organizational level, we should clearly come out with all the requirements, some testing levels or the standards, and how are we handling the data and keys and things like that. So I believe a lot of good companies, they have already put it in place, but at least, not at the national or the world level, but that can be deployed somewhere.
Yeah. So from third-party vendor perspective, do you see the manufacturers pushing this to their vendors and saying that, okay, so one is, okay, you adhere to, let's say, 21434, or second would be screw standard. This is our policy. If you follow this, then you're in. Otherwise, we're going to go to the next vendor. Is that happening, or it's we'll look at it later?
Yeah, I can see it. It is happening, at least within my, world. I see within my network, all my friends and colleagues in the automobile or in the medical world as well. People started getting it, actually. Security is one of the kind of basic DNA, which at least what I started feeling for quality, we used to have, quality starts with me. Similarly, the security also, each and every individual who's a part of the project or the team member, it is there. Yeah.
So do you see it being more tilted towards standards, do you see it more tilted towards existing standards or towards companies' self-created?
Both.
Policies?
I would say both. Yeah. If the standards and the other things, references guidelines are present in the market, let's use that. And if it is not, then create something. Or at least build your own organizational things. So,
okay.
Yeah.
And do you see, is it only limited to, okay, these are the policies, or this is the standard, you adhere to it, we get the component, whether it is firmware or hardware, or do you see organizations or company manufacturers doing, okay, this is passed, this is the component, give it to the red team to do an assessment and see if there are any issues, and then push back. Is that something that you see in the manufacturers?
So I can at least say, answer the question, I think, when I was working with some US manufacturers, I can tell which company it is, but there's not that many. So they have, they ask from suppliers, for security guarantees, but they kind of go for a specific standard. simplest thing is like that they have some ISO like 9001 like for quality standards or whatever. Like all these, we go through checkboxes and we kind of ask for security guarantees. I know a few vendors which are also getting parts from their suppliers, and they do sometimes pen testing like on their own. But it's a very traditional field where they kind of just assume like, okay, the vendor, or at least that particular company was so that the vendor figured out that everything is alright, and they kind of trust blindly in that. To be fair, there's also contracts in place, like if they figure out that they lied, then they kind of, squeeze money out of them basically later on. But it's so some companies actually do like pen tests on devices. The interesting thing is also like not always actually do the car companies have access to things like source code from the third-party vendors. There's like very big third-party vendors like Bosch, which are kind of like very, they sell you a part, they sell you an ECU, but they don't necessarily tell you like, okay, what's exactly in there. I'm not sure exactly about Bosch, to be fair, but there's some other like companies which are very, very secretive. Yeah, so you as a car manufacturer, you kind of need either to trust them, but they say like, okay, they do like a good job with their, threat modeling, with all the other things, or you need to just test it. And testing costs always money, so many companies kind of just try to kind of, skip that. And you run at some point into the issue that you have like a fleet of different firmwares, different versions of things, which you need to kind of keep track of. And this might become too big for some companies, and we decide just like, okay, we accept the risk, and if it comes down that something's broken, then we do a recall, and just happens. Part of the business, basically.
All right. So, yeah, the question that everyone is asking everywhere: how do you see the role of AI in terms of betterment of hardware security or hardware-based attacks?
So, that question is kind of interesting in the sense of like we have more AI nowadays in cars than people assume, and it kind of depends on the car also. If you think of a Tesla is basically not a car manufacturer. Many people think like it's a car manufacturer, but it's actually a software company. So they have like a lot of software in there. It's basically like imagine 4 electromotors and like a big computer which runs software on it. So they, with their structure, they have obviously other ways to kind of, establish AI in their system. For once, they use it for, the full self-driving, which will come at some point, I guess. On the other side, they might use it also for like, security detection. The problem with that is, and this is a problem like both for car manufacturers, and I saw it also in medical devices. If you want to have, your car or your medical device behave in a very deterministic way. If the AI is deciding like, oh, this is like a security threat, and it just, shuts off a very important thing in your system, that's kind of bad. So, when I'm talking to car manufacturers, once a year basically about that kind of things, they always tell to me like, okay, they the more security you add to a device, the worse it is, because that can have like, bad circumstances. And in regard to detection of threats, that's very, very similar. So what do you do if you detect a threat, right? So do you, how do you react? And this is like a very, very difficult question to answer. On the other side, we will have more and more AI in cars anyway, not necessarily like for security reasons, but more for like, full self-driving, like machine, like car-to-car communication and other things. So eventually this will come, but I will stick with my 1970s pickup for now, I guess.
All right. I see this is coming very much, Aseem. AI is definitely going to play a very, very big role. Nowadays, you see, because of the connectivity and the kind of a hardware infrastructure we have in the automobile as well. A lot of sensors are connected, and there's so much of data actually which can be analyzed, and especially like I have seen both the side of the world. I've been into the red side and the blue side both. So I can tell you that, especially from the, let's say, talk about the blue, implementing the security. So there are a lot of, AI algorithms which are very well matured enough to detect the threats, to identify the attacks very well in advance, and then again for protection as well, like what action needs to be taken up, and similarly, like on the other side of the world, the AI is becoming like a very basic tool to build the attacks, so it goes, but yeah, I don't know how many of you are from hardware side. So AI is just like becoming, maybe very, very soon, like a power supply in your hardware, so without power supply, you can't run the electronics, right? So similarly, very soon, like without AI, you don't have a software actually. So AI is definitely going to be everywhere. Yeah.
All right. So, yeah. So continuing the same question, but what do you envision as in the next 5 to 10 years? What are the kind of attacks and security issues you see in the automotive side, specifically from the hardware perspective?
So from a hardware perspective, there's two things which I see like in the next couple of years that will be more and more coming up more often. So from one side, this is not directly hardware; it's again like a little bit software. But the mix for like the differentiation between hardware and software is very difficult in cars nowadays. I think more and more people will kind of try to abuse such AI models basically by mess with people. There was like a case like some time ago where people used like a sticker and they put it like on a street post like at the city, and the Teslas detected that as a red traffic light. So all of the cars were basically stopping there, even though there was no traffic light there. And so I feel like at some point people will start to mess more with that kind of things. On the other side, and especially in Europe, we have like for the last like 10 kind of years more and more research in regard to car-to-car communication, like infrastructure to car communication, so that the traffic light tells the car like, hey, it's green right now. There was like a couple of years ago, like a really strong push that we will have that, so to optimize, the streets to kind of make like, self-driving cars, which are just riding in one line basically, possible. And, my worry there is like, if you need to rely on data which comes from other cars, that's a very dangerous kind of thing. And there's a lot of like research being done there to kind of figure out to like secure protocols, how to do that, how to trust other cars and everything. So the use of HSM models like attestation and other things, but this adds more and more complexity to that. And I see we will make some mistakes at some point down the road. And I don't know if people saw the video of like the Waymo cars in San Francisco, like going like in a loop where, I think we will see more and more things like that, but not necessarily happening by accident, but actually being introduced by people by, messing with machine learning, or like with AI detection basically, or with car-to-car communication. It will come one day. And we will see the effects also one day.
Yeah. No, I think pretty much well said.
All right. And so we've recently seen a lot of, not recently, it's been quite some time on RF attacks, like mostly on key fob. I thought it was a solved problem. But then I started to seeing, videos of people stealing.
Yeah, so we were like, when I was in academia, we had like a lot of research in regard to like key fobs, and so that you have like the distance bounding, so that, one of the typical attacks what people in Europe did is you had your car in a garage and you had the key at the entrance door of your house, and people were kind of using an antenna to kind of, pick up the signal of the key and like forward it directly to the car. And when car manufacturers kind of said like, okay, we need to have distance bounding, so we do like some checks where we kind of make sure that the key fob is actually next to the car, like with a physical way, basically, in the sense of like, time of travel of the waves. And then people develop like tools against that again to, still bypass that. So still nowadays today, the key fobs are still like, there's ways around that. There's like, we're not a secure kind of thing. Like all the RF stuff has some kind of vulnerability. So people always will figure out like a way, because we have the motivation. We want your car in a way, right? So, as soon as you have like some expensive thing which someone else wants to do, then they will find resources to kind of find ways around that. And to be fair, cars are not military grade, secure systems. So there's always like a race between like how much money do we spend to kind of secure something versus, how much it will basically, what the impact is like for me as a company if someone steals my car or someone else's car.
All right. Yeah. So, probably the last question is, what advice would you give to startups or smaller companies who are trying to either A, break into automotive security space, or B, making either a vehicle or a charger or something to do with the vehicle infrastructure? What would your advice be from a security perspective?
Yep, I think one of the very important thing, if you're a supplier, don't think just from a component perspective. Always think from the system perspective. Because the attacks are getting more and more complicated, and a lot of time I found people just think about only their piece, but they don't think the overall system. And the vulnerabilities are mostly maybe appear not only from the system which is targeted, but it starts from somewhere else actually. So it is very much, it should be driven from the requirements, and then probably writing the proper test cases and then designing. Everything goes together. So not just from the components. If you're a supplier, just think about the entire system, and then jot down all the what are the possible vulnerabilities and the exploits which are possible in that scenario. Yeah.
I see you more as a secure SDLC guy.
Actually, that's a very good advice. So the thing is, what most people don't realize again, so if you're a startup and you develop a product right now, and you become a successful startup and you cut some corners in the development or like a design of your product, this will hunt you down at some point. So don't try to kind of cut corners. Use secure design, security by design, basically. Obviously, for regulatory purposes, you need to have also all the safety stuff. But if you try to cut corners, or if you try to kind of fix things at some point in the future in production, this will most of the time not work out. And I saw at some point one company was was getting like an audit basically because some other company wanted to buy them, and just the system, like the way how we designed the system was such in a horrible way that they basically called off the purchase of a company. So if you ever think of hey, let me create a startup company and I will cut corners, I will produce some kind of car product which is interesting, like an electric charger, and will just get bought by some big company. The big company will at some point look at your stuff, and they might realize okay, this is we don't want to touch that, and you're kind of might have an issue there. But you will be still surprised. I saw a multiple electric chargers. You would be surprised how many Raspberry Pis are in some electrical chargers companies. So they start with a breadboard and a Raspberry Pi, and at some point this breadboard in a slightly different form and the Raspberry Pi ends up in the final product, which is sold millions of times in particular countries. I don't want to mention the country right now, but you can guess which one it is.
Yeah, but don't you see that like a catch-22 problem? Like, you are a startup. You need customers to get money. You need to develop the product. You need to have money to A, develop the product, and then B, secure it. Right? Because security will cost extra money, whatever you do. So, if you don't have money, how do you develop and then secure it? Let's say you developed it, but you have to now secure it as well to get to the customer so that he can pay you maybe after 3 months or 6 months or God knows when.
Yeah, so one of the main issues which you generally have is that security doesn't pay. So a customer will not give you more money just because you use some more crypto or some better chip in your device. Like if it's a car or like electric chargers are kind of, one thing which I'm looking at too. And, so it's a general problem, but sometimes, things like secure design or security by design, like in secure development and all these kind of things, they don't cost too much. It's just literally it's a thing you need to sit down beforehand, think of a threat model, what is our problem, and design it in a good way. And in the development time itself, it's not that much bigger than if you try to cut corners, because later on, you will need to fix it at some point anyway. So, why not just do it right from the beginning?
All right. Yeah. I think we are done from our side. Yeah. So we spoke about, info systems as one of the issues with the security of vehicles. We talked about crypto as in cryptography, symmetric key implementation on how you store it. We spoke a lot about secure SDLC, which manufacturers should follow. And I think vehicle to vehicle and infrastructure to vehicle is going to open a lot of attack surfaces, right? Yeah. All right. So yeah, with that, I think we are open to questions, and then we can call it a day. Yes. Anybody? You can choose to ignore him.
Okay, so 2014, Charlie Miller presents Jeep Cherokee hack at Black Hat, right? And 2015, Javier presents Can Badger, right? Both goes on to show remotely you can control a car, right? Harun Mir, 2016, right at Nullcon says, you car hackers or hardware hackers, you are kind of a villain. You are stopping more safe cars to be released because you find some vulnerability and hold the release of new cars, right? So how do I perceive you? Villain who is stopping new, safer cars to be released in the market, or heroes who are trying to save us from maybe remotely exploitable, remotely possible vulnerability affecting me? How should I see you guys?
I mean, that's a good question. On the other side, I must say that, I'm not the one who's like adding more wireless connectivity in my car, or I prefer not to have wireless connectivity in my car. But it's a decision which the car company makes at some point. So they add like things, and you see a lot of hacks happen like through like telemetry, the telemetry backend. Like infotainment is like one thing. Why the heck does my infotainment system need to be on the same CAN bus as like, my brakes, right? So there's a lot of kind of decisions which company made at some point. And you can't really blame me just because you decided to do that like that I kind of point out that, it's not a good idea, and there's like ways to kind of mess with that. So on one side, I mean, obviously, instead of like telling that to the companies, I could just like exploit that and maybe kill some people or something, and then I would be the villain, obviously. But I mean, in the end of the day, I try to make our world a little bit safer and, fill my pockets a little bit with companies who are not very safe. Yeah, so I feel like I'm kind of feel like I'm the good guy here, but I mean maybe the but maybe the companies see it a little bit different. I mean it's always like a perspective, I guess. But I know that developers sometimes just hate meetings with us. Like at like sometimes like every time like I had like a Zoom call with one particular company, we're like rolled their eyes like what's going on now. But I mean it is how it is in the end. If I'm not complaining about that and you're not fixing it, someone else will find it eventually, and the problem doesn't go away just because I'm not talking about it.
That's why he's Dennis, the menace for manufacturers.
But Charlie was banned from pitching other vehicles.
No, I think he's
so
very well said.
I think that's an ideological and a very philosophical issue. It's exactly the same as kernel developers swearing at security researchers and they doing it back to kernel developers. I don't think it makes sense. Somebody's Robin Hood is somebody's terrorist, right? So for example, for researchers, if somebody finds a critical vulnerability in a car, he's a hero. Whereas if he's hampering the sales of cars for a manufacturer, he's a villain, right? So it's all, I think, a perspective at the end of the day.
Actually, just one thing to add. So some companies, and this is like a new thing, they add subscriptions or like additional features, like as a software-defined car in a way. And so companies sometimes see us like also as bad people because we kind of find ways to, enable things which are not there before. Although it's just like literally a bit you flip, and then your car can do way more things, but you didn't pay for it in a way. So it's kind of like it's a weird, shady kind of field. So car companies are a little bit, on one side, they're thankful that we find things which are, bad. On the other side, they're kind of not happy that we poke around there because that might have like an impact on their business model, because we can unlock cars and it magically, has a park assist feature, which is literally one bit. The car it's already in the firmware. The car can do that. It has all the hardware. It's just like one bit which needs to be flipped, and you didn't pay like $10,000 to enable it. And I mean, I feel it's like a little bit, why not just flip the bit by yourself?
Yeah. No. Yeah. So I totally agree with him. We got project twice because of this. We did a project for a manufacturer, identified critical vulnerabilities, gave it to them, and they were like, yeah, this we have to do because of our, support and debugging process. So we have to keep it open. This was specifically around JTAG, and we told them that, your device is going to shit if you keep it open. They said, no, we have a process for debugging. The device comes here. Our support engineers hook it onto the JTAG, and then they do da-da-da-da. Exactly, I think 2 years after, they came back to us, hey, you mind looking at the security of the product? And we said, okay, what happened? Do you want us to do the evaluation again? No. Here are some couple of links. Just go and check what's happening. So we went, and there was a modding community for that device. And basically what they were doing was they were bypassing the subscription. And they wanted to identify how are they bypassing this, because our devices are closed. And so we went back again, we did the testing, we gave them the JTAG entry again, and we said, look, whatever has happened has only happened because of this. You have other minor vulnerabilities which you've added, but nobody can get inside and bypass the subscription unless they have access to JTAG, for example. Good for us.